Hello, and welcome to today's ACMP member webinar. Our topic today, Introduction to Agile Change, and it will be presented by Dr. Jen Frahm. My name is Michelle Levy, and I will be your moderator for today. Before we get started, I would like to share some information on the latest happenings at ACMP. We have several terrific educational opportunities coming up. Change San Diego will be held in person on February 29th through March 2nd of this year, while the Change Management Global Connect 2024 will be held virtually June 11th through June 13th. ACMP's prestigious certification program has over 2,000 CCMPs. Now is the time to join this elite class of change management professionals and experience the opportunities the CCMP will open up for you. For more information on applying or for renewing your CCMP, please visit acmpglobal.org/CCMP. One of the most valued benefits to our ACMP members is our ACMP resource library, where you can access 10 years worth of member-only tools, webinars like this, conference presentations, and white papers. The resource library is consistently ranked as one of our top member benefits, so we hope you will take advantage of it. Before we get started, a few housekeeping items. All audio lines have been muted, and today's webinar will run until 7 p.m. Eastern Time. If you have questions or comments during the presentation, please post it in the chat. Questions for the presenter will be answered at the end of the presentation. And now, I would like to introduce today's presenter. Dr. Jen Frahm is the co-founder of the Agile Change Leadership Institute and builds change capabilities in organizations. She is a global expert on organizational change, communication, and transformation. She is a tamer of ambiguity, speaker of truths, and solver of problems. A sought-after speaker, she is known for being at the frontier of business agility and change. She is the author of Change Leader, The Changes You Need to Make First, that was published in 2021, along with Conversations of Change, A Guide to Workplace Change, and co-author of the Agile Change Playbook. An interesting fact is that Jen lives in Melbourne, Australia, and right now it is 10 in the morning. Also, it is Australia Day today in her country. Thank you for joining our webinar today. Jen, I would like to turn it over to you to get us started.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Michelle, for that beautiful introduction. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you are joining us. It is an absolute joy to be joining you. Michelle is absolutely correct. It is Australia Day here as I join you. And I was laughing with Michelle earlier. It feels like a lot of institutions in America have prominent Australians come and speak to them on January the 25th in your land to celebrate Australia Day. And I felt, well, ACMP is following suite. They have myself coming to speak to you. So I'm going to lobby ACMP for every year now on this day that they have an Australian speaker provide a webinar as their nod to Australia Day. I don't know how you feel about that. I am joining you from the lands of the Wurundjeri people, Woiwurrung, Naarm, Kulin Nation, which is the inner west of Melbourne in Australia. So today we are going to cover a fair bit of information in this. And I know Michelle said I'm really happy to take questions at the end of this, and we've got some time to do that. But I also know when I've attended webinars, sometimes you've got a question you've just got to get out. So if you do want to drop that into the chat as we go, I'll keep an eye on it and possibly be able to respond to it as we go. So you've got two options: either drop a question as we go and we'll see if we can cover that, or hold to the end of the session. It's up to you. Do whatever makes you feel comfortable and helps you with the learning. Okay, let's get into this. So, interesting. We have a keyboard malfunction. Lucky I am agile. Bear with me. Here we go. Here's a little bit about myself. So as Michelle said, I've been working in change for a long time now. And I've kind of got this interesting, there's a few of us out there, we're considered pracademics. And what that means is that we have spent time as an academic, but perhaps have a yearning more for the practical side of the work we do. One of the highlights, I think, with the work that I've done is that I've been really lucky to have a very big, diverse group of industries and clients and organizations that I've worked with. And I like to giggle. I've worked with midwives. I've worked in cemetery organizations. So when you're looking for somebody who has done cradle to grave change management, I'm your gal. I've been there. But I also think it's helpful to sort of contextualize in terms of, where I come from, my practice, in terms of who I am outside of what you see on LinkedIn. And so I am a painter. I find that playing with paints is really a wonderful way to stay creative and thinking differently about the work that you see in front of you. I stay grounded with the work that we do by taking beautiful hikes in the bush, which is where you get to see that little fellow up on the right-hand side. And one of my claims to fame is I love bringing people together around the dinner table. And I spent my first Thanksgiving in the States in Princeton. So I did my part of my studies at Princeton University, where I was introduced to the concept of Thanksgiving. And so I brought it back to Australia. So this little image down on the bottom of the screen is this year's Thanksgiving dinner, where, we don't celebrate Thanksgiving in Australia, but for me, it's a moment to stop, pause, and give thanks to the people around you. And, gratitude is such an important principle in change work. The more you can get people really tapping into gratitude, the better, the more resilient people are in change. So let's have a look for the structure bunnies in the room. Here's what we are going to be covering today. So we're going to have a little look at what is Agile Change, what we can do about it as change practitioners. I'm going to introduce you to the capability approach to Agile Change, and then offer you 3 Agile Change practices that you can work with tomorrow, straight after this. So let's level set. We actually found when we started doing work in the space of Agile Change that there's very little definitional work done on it. And so this is what we would like to offer to those people who haven't really thought about what is Agile Change Management and how does it differ from perhaps traditional change management that you're familiar with. And Agile Change Management is a body of work that seeks to support people, so we've still got that people focus, through the delivery of change at speed with lean resourcing. So it applies to both business agility transformations and the context of agile delivery of technology and product releases or projects, because I want to recognize now that Agile is permeating space outside of product development and technology. So some of you may be experiencing Agile concepts in domains that have nothing to do with technology and product release. So the foundations of the Agile Change Management body of work are really being a change practitioner with an Agile mindset, using Agile change practices and tools, and Agile ways of working. Now, my partner in the Agile Change Leadership Institute, Lena Ross, introduced this conceptualization in one of her earlier books, and we've found it incredibly useful because it's something you can do on the back of a post-it note when you're talking to stakeholders. Often you'll hear people talking about, but are we talking about big A or little a? And so this is one way to think of it, is big A Agile really comes from what we know as the Agile Manifesto. So the 4 values, the 12 principles coming from the software developers in the conference in Utah, and really talks about how we do Agile. However, small a talks more to really that concept of the adjective, being adaptive, flexible, nimble, faster, and it's more about how we are being agile. Now, it's not to say that you won't have both playing out at the same time, but it is helpful to be able to make a demarcation between are we doing agile, are we being agile when we think about our change practice. And here's the tricky bit, because to be effective in supporting big A agile delivery, change practitioners often have to do organizational change work on the small A. It's really hard to embrace big A rituals and ceremonies and new ways of working if you haven't already, as an organization, moved to being more adaptive and nimble and responsive. Now, big A agile doesn't always require a change methodology. Small a often does. And what that means for you, if you are working in this field, is that it's a dual focus with a lot of switching context. And so to some extent, working in agile change management is both invigorating, but it can be quite tough, right? Because you're having to switch between those two spaces. You're having to stick to your overarching change methodology and then let it go as you move into supporting the delivery teams. That can be tough work. So let me just stop for a moment. Would you mind putting in the chat, based on what we've covered, big A, little a, what's the most, which is most applicable? Are you working on small a, bit of both? Haven't touched either. Let me know who's in the room. Look at that chat go. Okay, small a, both. Big A, both. Okay, so we've got a fair bit of experience here. Probably the majority of these are going to be small a agility. So that's quite interesting in terms of where you'll be moving to. And I'll talk a little bit about that. Wonderful. Thank you for sharing. Okay, let's have a look at why does this matter? The first thing we need to think about is that change is changing. If I think about 12 years ago, I was doing an NPS rollout for one of the 4 biggest banks in Australia. I had the budget for a team of 12 people, right? I had $1 million budget for resourcing. It was a really big piece of work. Then 2 years later, I'm working in an organization and I'm rolling out a Workday implementation to 28 countries, and I've got a team of 2 people only. 1 year after that, I'm working in an organization and I'm the only change practitioner. So what we are finding is that the work we do is, we're not getting to work with large teams of change practitioners. And that can be quite overwhelming and challenging if we're still using a mindset of this is how we should be doing change. Second of all, ways of working have rolled out. New ways of working means that we need to be more collaborative. We need to be working with more people. We've got more visual management happening. And we've had to really embrace that into our change practice. Again, if I think about 12 years ago, we had a room that we worked in and were quite remote from all of our stakeholders. And there was very much that sense of every document had to be perfect before we handed it to somebody. And we've really had to let go of that. Third thing that has really changed for us in the space of change is the runways are so much shorter. 12 years ago, I had 12 weeks to be able to put forward the plan for what we were going to do. These days, when I walk into an organization, it's more likely the next change is about to drop in 2 to 3 weeks. And there's a real strong focus on sprint cadence. So we're having to deliver change much faster than we have ever had to before. I think this is the biggest thing and the most practical thing that has really hit us of late is that if you are on the market or about to be on the market, you're going to find that a lot of the job ads at the moment are now all asking for you to have an understanding or an experience in big A or little a agile. So they're still asking for their change management methodologies, but as we see, their sound understanding of workplace models, e.g. agile. Agile digital delivery, right? Agile PMP, Six Sigma. These are all change manager ads that I've pulled in the last 2 weeks, right? So in regard to Prince2, Agile and ProSci methodologies. So if you're not there yet at the moment, you're going to find that you're going to be asked to speak about what do you know about Agile and your understanding of it, and how do you adapt your practice as a change manager. So it is quite clear to us that what we did previously as change practitioners will not hold up now, right? It is fast becoming obsolete. And there's a real challenge for us in terms of, if you have become highly reliant on a particular methodology or a way of doing change, it falls into that phrase, when your only tool is a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? One of the challenges when Lena Ross and I first came together to develop this piece of work was, do we actually create an agile change methodology? And it made no sense to us. It made no sense from the perspective of there are dozens of really good change methodologies out there at the moment. We know that you've already gone through processes to be certified in multiple. What would be more helpful to people is to think about the capabilities involved in agile change. And that way you can include and accommodate the change models and processes you already have. And what this means when we take a capability approach is that you're challenged to ask, what is my default position? Right? So when I go into a change project, what do I usually do? And then how might I approach this differently? So let's have a look at the capability approach. When you take a capability approach, the lovely thing about this is you can drop your tools. And when you drop your tools, you get lighter, right? It makes you much more flexible and adaptable to what's happening around you. We worked through this to determine that when you are working agile, and Lena and I have been working agile, well, Lena primarily has worked in agile transformation and business agility. I tend to do more big A work. But what we both found in common is that the work we do has three core capabilities. Regardless of what we're doing, we are deploying data-informed decision-making, continuous engagement, and then visual and transparent communication. And then when you think at from a practice level in terms of what do we actually do, it's working out loud, change data use, visual management, and the use of the Kanban board. And if you take nothing else away from this webinar other than start playing with these 4 core practices, you are automatically going to be a much more agile change practitioner. Let's have a look. If you consider these as a Venn diagram, so we've got the capability of data-informed decision-making, of communication, and continuous engagement, they do overlap. There's some of the things that we do in our change practice that could be considered overlapping of those capabilities. Let me just check what do you mean about working out loud? Nikki, I'm going to get to that. Spoiler alert, it's the one change practice that has absolutely transformed the way I work for the better. So hold tight. These capabilities overlap. What is at the core are those 4 core practices: working out loud, use of change data, visual management, Kanban board. And then if you think of all of the different agile change practices that you use, you can map those to these Venn diagram, right? To these capabilities. And again, if you think about using a change canvas or stand-ups, they will overlap communication and engagement. So we do have space for our change practices to be overlapping. You don't have to use our 50 agile change practices, right? We've got these in our agile change playbook, and we've got them in our certificate program. You could take this concept and draw the diagram right now, and I'd encourage you to do it, and start thinking about all of the things that you normally do in change projects. How do they map to these 3 capabilities, right? Brilliant exercise to do if you're a team leader, or perhaps you're working with a team, is to sit down and work through what are our change practices, what are our tools, where do they fit if we take a capability lens? Because that way it starts to highlight where you might have gaps and blind spots. Now, here's the nice thing for those people who are starting to feel a little bit nervous about their beloved change methodologies. You get to keep them all. We absolutely would not advocate that you be trying to force fit and cram, ADCAR into 2-week sprints. That's not going to work. Using cramming ProSci or Cotter's work into a sprint cadence is not going to work. But let us show you how you can adapt them. Let me just check that chat. Yes, fabulous. Okay. So it's really an option for you to plug and play, right? So bring up what your favorite change methodology is and ask yourself, what is your relative mix of agile change capabilities when you're doing it? Let's have a look. If we take ProSci methodology, right? Prepare, approach is the first phase of it. Define success, define impact, define approach. The question that you want to ask yourself at this point is, do I need more data-informed decision-making and engagement than communication at this point? So think relative to that phase. And if the answer is yes to that, then you might say, okay, if I have a short runway, if I have reduced resources, perhaps the best I can do to prepare approach is to run a futurospective, establish my MV change process, and set up some user stories to create a backlog. That might be a really good way to define your success, the impact and approach. Our pro tip in this space is less is more, right? Play with your practices and let feedback be your friend. Your feedback will determine, was this a good thing to do or should I try something else? So you do need to be a little bit brave here, right? If we think about ProSci's manage the change, so plan and act, track performance, adapt actions, same question. Do I rely at this point more on engagement and communication? We think we would. Let's activate the 3% rule and look at social architecture. This is a brilliant space where 60% done and shared is really helpful to you, but let's roll in some storytelling and some Pecha Kucha, perhaps some infographics to assist with this. Similar concept, sustain the outcomes. You're asking the same question. So you're being very systematic and you're saying, which of the agile capabilities or agile change capabilities dominate in sustain outcomes? Or is it an even spread? And so it's really about being thoughtful and logical with the time you have, the resources you have, and what is the outcome that you want to achieve. If we want to drop this down to a level, you're following exactly the same process. Take the ADCAR. If you're looking at the individual change model, I would argue that you're probably going to want to have high communication, moderate engagement, low data-informed decision-making on the awareness phase, right? So infographics, social architecture, microcomms become really helpful. And you go one by one through each of those, building desire. And again, we want high engagement and you need good data to inform what you're going, what's actually going to turn people on. So your lean coffee, storytelling, lean filmmaking, perhaps running a I like, I wish, I want session are wonderful agile change tools that will help you with it. And so on. I have to say, there is not one change process or change methodology that's out there that we have not been able to overlay the agile change capabilities and consider what would be the agile change practices we use. So this is such a good news story, right? We're not telling you throw out your change methodologies. We're saying let's be thoughtful about how you use them in an agile environment. And perhaps you need to supplement your toolkits so you've got some more agile change practices that are helpful to you. Please define the change data you are referring to. And again, I'm about to talk to that. You are reading my mind, people, and I'm loving it. What a switched on group. Okay, so to that point, let's have a look at 3 agile change practices. It's really a story of thinking about the way we used to do things and what you could do now. So, once upon a time, I had to have a 40-page change management plan, which inevitably had to be signed off by 15 stakeholders, and they'd all have their red pens out wanting to make changes. And that would be a 3-month experience to actually get a change management plan completed and signed off and socialized. Pro tip, never use the term socialize unless there's a G&T in hand, right? So um, shared amongst your stakeholders. And now it's a one-page change management roadmap. So simple, so effective, because Agile Change is all about driving conversations, right? How do you have more conversations that enable you to make progress with your change? Once upon a time, we were really focused on developing change champions, and to some extent, the whole change champion concept has become a bit of a poison chalice, right? Nobody wants to be a change champion. However, social architecture teaches us to look for where is the pulse in the communities, in the organizations. How do we align our change to those communities and let them live within? Once upon a time, we drowned in spreadsheets, right? Stakeholder identification spreadsheets. Now we do persona mapping and blast radius. We do think, act, feel mapping. There's all these things that we do in Agile Change that are so powerful in that they are visually attractive. So they engage our stakeholders and they really facilitate fantastic conversations. Yes, you will get these slides, Taylor. They're going to be shared afterwards. Kenya, wonderful. Lovely to hear. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, let's have a look. Working out loud. We were asked, what's working out loud? Working out loud is defined as observable work and narrating your work. The term was coined by a gentleman called Bryce Williams nearly 15 years ago. I think we're talking now. And if you want to read more on it, you're going to find John Stepper has created a whole space around working out loud, has a specific methodology about it. But what it boils down to for me in the change space is, how do I make my work visible as I am going so that it makes my work better, right? By working out loud, publicly, transparently, people look at it, they engage with it, they interact with it, they make it better. I only work out loud and share what I'm doing when I'm doing so from a space of generosity. I believe that what I have to share is going to make your life easier, better. You might want to use something of what I'm doing. It helps me build a social network. It makes it all so much more purposeful. Let me give you some ideas about how we might do it. To work out loud, you need to think about how do you make it visible. Now, in an online context, that might be a wiki, it might be a Miro board. In an organization, perhaps it's a wall, a room, or a poster. You need to think about, what is your invitation and what are you prepared to risk? The reason why I use the risk word is that you can feel incredibly vulnerable when you're working out loud, right? You're saying that I need your help in making this better when you've been brought in to be the all-knowing, all-competent change practitioner. So you have to think about what it's worth risking. You need to show people how what you are demonstrating adds value to them in their world. Always note the new connections you're making, right? And consider how you can help them. You want to build your social capital when you're working out loud, and make sure you have got a goal attached to your initiative. I don't know if anybody on this webinar remembers the old days of Twitter. And when Twitter first started, there was a lot of sharing photos and here's what I'm having for breakfast. When you first start working out loud, it can feel like those early days, because you're like, do people really want to see what I'm doing? And that's why it's important to think about what's the goal attached to your initiative. Here's an example of working out loud back in 2015 when I was doing that Workday implementation across 28 countries. Now, that was interesting, right? I needed to engage 28 countries with that. So it was heavily dependent on Yammer, so now Viva Engage. And what we did was we set up a reverse go live process where you start at the end of go live, work backwards with people in the organization telling us what did they need at certain points. But we narrated this through posts on Yammer, and we kept that channel open, or that particular post open, for about 4 days so that we could accommodate the different time zones. So they would add comments onto those posts. We would then go in and we'd do what we needed to do with that. So one of the things to think about is we do have some complexities in the work we're doing. Let me just check in and see if there's questions here. Yep. Okay. Great. 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 Can you help understand what Agile course was? I can, but let's hold that to the end. Thank you, Anne. So yeah, this is how we did it then. When we talk about what we're prepared to risk, the example when I talked about the bank, the NPS, that was a really interesting example because I was told I had to create an enterprise strategy in a very short period of time, something like 2 weeks, to present to the group executive. So really, really high stakes. The only way I knew to do that was to work out loud, to be able to work collaboratively and speed. So I set up a room in the bank where my change team, remember I had a big change team with that, we print out every artifact that we had at whatever stage it was at. We then put on Yammer that anybody who had an interest in NPS, whether they be change practitioners or people in the bank, the explicit goal, I was really clear. I said, I have to create this in 2 weeks, and this is an activity that would normally take us 12 weeks. I need your help. So for me, it kind of felt like that was a very risky thing to do. It was effectively starting the change communication on NPS in the bank, right? We hadn't announced it at that point, but there I was putting this post up on Yammer. It was phenomenal. I had so many change practitioners come into the room. They said, oh, you're going to need a change analysis on the retail part of the bank. I did that 3 weeks ago. Let me send it over to you. So I had change practitioners all through the bank sharing artifacts that had been recently done that we could adapt and use. It had started the engagement with leaders in the organization who all came running down to find out about it, and then gave me an option to build out an engagement plan. So incredibly powerful way of working. Now, interesting, our next Agile Change practice is the use of change data. So this is a Agile Change scorecard that we run. And if anybody wants to do it, if you look at the featured posts on my LinkedIn profile, you're going to see it there. You can click through to it. We've now had 400 people do the scorecard, and we measure Agile acumen, data-informed decision-making capability, continuous engagement, communication, and then the change practitioner's ability to adapt to changing an uncertain world. Wonderfully, that is the highest segment in the scorecard. So give yourself a pat on the back. We are all doing so well at adapting to really challenging environments. But the area that people are most challenged with is how do they make data-informed decision-making. Now, this is really important to you if we're looking to do change at speed, because what you need to do, how we reduce the gap between unknown and known, is we do things that give us data that tell us what is directionally correct, right? We need to get rid of the concept of perfection. We need to get rid of the concept of, being right. Excuse me. And think about directionally correct, and it's your data that helps you with it. So data-informed decision-making, you can uncover data with network analysis. So maybe you're using something like Swoop Analytics or Innovisor. Don't disregard that all of your data platforms have got some form of native analysis with that. Excuse me. You can also use your change data to help you with conversations around change saturation, which helps inform who is the best team to start this change with, right? Is this team particularly overwhelmed, or is this part of the organization overwhelmed? We can use it for communication effectiveness. So thinking about open rates, click-throughs, and whether you're using platforms like Campaign Monitor, MailChimp, Adobe Campaign, even Microsoft Outlook has now introduced an analytics version where you can start to see open rates and click-throughs and things like that. So have a chat with your internal comms platforms, people, to understand what's available to you. Don't neglect old-fashioned voice of the people, right? If you don't have the software or the platforms or the automated data coming to you, you can still ask people, right? You can still run polls. Maybe you're using a platform like Culture Amp, which allows you to do pulse checks, but physical attendance can be a really good piece of data for you. What's the tone of voice that people are having? Here's an example from that Workday implementation, right? So Workday, when we were rolling it out across 28 countries, was highly political. Every country manager wanted to be the one that went first. Obviously, you're not going to be able to do that. So the methodology that we used was follow the sun. And so it meant that at 8 o'clock in the morning, everybody would get the initial email, which gave them their logins, told them they were enabled, give them a list of things that they would have to do. So that meant it went live in New Zealand first, then Australia, then Asia, and followed the sun all the way around. Now, we had a room in the organization, we were using Campaign Monitor, which gives you world view. And in real time, you can see emails being opened, little dots popping up. It's very thrilling. We were in a room. We were feeling very confident with ourselves because we had just seen New Zealand go live. Australia was working beautifully. It was about 11 o'clock in Australian time, so we were heading into Asia. We could see the countries working, and then we saw one country was not opening. And we knew the political ramifications, and particularly around loss of face, that was going to be really important if we didn't have all countries going live at the same time. Because we had that data in real time, we could pick up the phone and speak to one of the HR business partners in that country and say, hey, what's going on there that we should know about that's impacting this rollout? They told us. We were able to mitigate, adapt what we were doing, and everything went smoothly for the rest of the day. So beautiful, beautiful example of how data really helped us adapt what we were doing from a change practice on a global launch and made everything go smoothly. Now, a lot of the platforms that offer data are SaaS-based, right? So MailChimp, Campaign Monitor, Slido, PolyV, Culture Amp, all of the vendors that specialize in change adoption. The challenge we have today, as of January 2024, of course, is the wave of malware and cyber scam that is going around. And it means that most organizations are really getting super tight on what platforms will be used because of breach of data and who has access to them. You do have some workarounds there, right? So you can look at a lot of organizations are really building capability in Power BI. So, that could be a really good way to create opportunities for you. I think that should be a development plan for most change managers, is to become familiar with Power BI. I wouldn't advocate that you become experts in it, but you need to know what it's capable of because it's a wonderful source of data for you that is friendly to information security people. The second thing is, I have always found that going and having a chat with your information security people and explaining what you want to do, why you want to do it, the cost that it will save to the organization if you can do change well, they love being included in those conversations and being seen as problem solvers, not police people. So I would also really recommend that if you want to work faster and more adaptive in your change practice, that you start making InfoSec people your friends, because they tend to get villainized in a lot of organizations, right? Because they're the ones saying no to everything you want to do. Third agile change practice, and then we're heading into space for questions. I think we've got a few there, is pecha-kucha. So pecha-kucha is a Japanese word for chit-chat. It came about from the architect and the design community in Japan. And what they would do is they would come together and share 20 slides, 20 seconds each, about something that they'd done. And so we have found that this has been adapted in conferences as lightning talks. But what it's really fun to do is adapt it in organizations to create short, sharp presentations, right? I like to go 5 slides in 5 minutes. The benefit of this is that it keeps presentations concise and fast paced, no more death by PowerPoint. We had a fabulous example back in beginning of 2019. Lena and I came over to Palo Alto. We were working with VMware. They were pulling together all of their global HR VPs. And so there were about 100 of them had come from all over the world. We were running a 2-day program with them to introduce them to Agile and what it would mean to be more agile in the work they did as HR practitioners. And as part of pulling together that 2-day workshop, the people that we were dealing with said, oh, by the way, we want to release our strategy for the year at that 2-day workshop. And we've got 6 VPs who want to share what the strategy is going to be. They're going to need 45 minutes each. Now, if you do the sums, you will fast recognize that a 2-day workshop has just been eaten up 1 day of it with strategy presentations. So we pushed back on this and we said, well, how about your VPs role model Agile Change communication, and they do those strategies using a Pecha Kucha session. And we had to do a little bit of coaching because this was really outside of people's comfort zones. But it was amazing. So each one of those VPs got up and they gave their annual strategy, 5 slides, 5 minutes. They sweat, they shook, they stammered. And when we did a retrospective at the end of the day, the people in the audience said, this was the first time I've actually understood any of our strategies and felt like our leaders were real people. So it had this really wonderful, engaging connection opportunity. Now, I speak all over the world as a keynote speaker. I am the first person to tell you the thing that terrifies me most is a Pecha Kucha session, right? The challenge to get concise, and keep to time is really, really hard. So I want to validate for you, if you're trying this in your organizations, it will feel exceptionally uncomfortable. But once you push past that, it's incredibly fun and so very, very effective. Let me check in with the chats. Yep. Yeah, beautiful. Thanks, Robert. Appreciate that. Okay. Let us have a look. Let's recap. All right. Here's why we're going Agile Change. Change is changing. We no longer have the luxuries of big change teams to work with. We have to adapt to new ways of working with the rest of the organization, right? Change is not immune to having to think about how do we do things differently, just as we're asking other people in organizations to adapt to new ways of working. Our runways are getting incredibly shorter for us, and that proves to be quite challenging. And then finally, for those of us on the job market or about to be on the job market, how do you stand out in a crowd? So interesting. Little side story. Beginning of last year, I was helping a client recruit for a change manager into a agile. It wasn't an agile, sorry, it was a change practice. And we ran an ad. We had 70 applications. About 30 of those applications were not change managers, had never been change managers, wouldn't be considered. However, 40 were very clearly change managers. And 38 of them had ProSci right up the top of the resume. Understandably, right? There's a lot of organizations demand ProSci. But when you're looking at 40 resumes that all say, I'm a ProSci certified change practitioner, it actually gets really difficult to tell who's going to stand out from each other. As it happens, we had 5 of those 30 who had gone and done further development in Agile, human-centered design, design thinking, neuroscience, behavioral economics. And so they looked really interesting because we went, okay, these are practitioners who are keeping up with where the industry is going. And then only 3 of those change practitioners could present a resume using what we would describe as Agile change capabilities, right? So almost infographic style, use of icons, clear white space, really good visual management in their resume, which told us these people know how to communicate to really busy people so that they can see the key things in a short period of time. That told us more about their capabilities than the interview did. So just something to think about there. At the heart of Agile change practice are 3 capabilities, 4 core practices. If you do nothing else out of this webinar, but you start to think about what am I doing and which capability would this fit? How might I introduce working out loud? Where is the change data I could use? What could I do to deploy more visual management in the work that I do? And am I using a Kanban board enough in the work I do? You will be a better change practitioner. It's interesting. One of the questions we most often get asked is, my organization isn't agile. Can I still do these things? And my answer is 100%, right? If you look at a successful change manager, they do rely on continuous engagement, visual and transparent communication, data-informed decision making. They're also very courageous, right? They're brave. They try new things. They are curious. They continuously learn, and they're playful. They have fun with the work they do. And that would be my invitation to you, is just to have fun with the change work you're doing. If you've enjoyed this, I would invite you to connect with me on LinkedIn. Perhaps share in an update what your biggest aha was and make sure that you tag me. I'm going to stop sharing now so that, Michelle, we can have a look at some of those questions and really get into the nitty gritty.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jen, so much. It's so interesting in the chat how many interesting comments are coming in and questions. And I just wanted to remind everybody that maybe all of our questions won't be answered on the call today, but if they don't get answered, they will be taken over to the webinar exchange community in ACMP Connect. And we hope that you will join the continued conversation. I think that there's a lot of interest in this topic.
Yeah. Michelle, sorry, can I interrupt? One thing I did forget to tell you is there is a wonderful Agile Change community on Connect. So I would also invite people who are interested in this space to make sure that you join that community as well, because it has people who are experienced and not experienced, and they're great conversations. So yeah, sorry, Michelle.
Oh no, that's perfect. And I think what you're talking about, that is such a large body of knowledge. And then just a couple of things on the questions. Michelle Barr said, I love the phrase working out loud, and it's new to me, but I often talk about showing my workings, and it gives a way to give a structure about it. And also, another comment was, we acknowledge emotions and deal in facts. Uh, and so that really
Mm,
relates to your comments about what are the key concepts of data informed decision making.
yeah.
So we wanted to know with the topic, and wanting to learn more, people were saying, I want to learn more, or what certification. They're interested in knowing how to develop the 3 capabilities and 4
Yeah.
core practices. Are there any podcasts or any videos that you could recommend?
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay. So I'm super conscious that ACMP is not a fan of selling from the stage. So I'm going to be mindful of what I talk about. But if you want free education in this, just start Googling Agile Change, look at the hashtag on LinkedIn. So you're going to find that we've got a podcast that's about to launch, Conversations of Agile Change. There are other people out there who have podcasts in the space. Natasha Redmond Casa de Cambio is always very good, often has a bit of an agile influence on that. I'm a big fan of Agile Uprising, so it's pure agile, But why I love that is I actually get to listen to it and think about, oh, how would I apply that to my craft? So I think this is the thing is we are still in a nascent space. And what that means is, you know, we are developing this as we go. Think about engage with agile communities and then think about, okay, talk to your scrum masters and your coaches and how would I apply that to my space? So you're going to find we have a LinkedIn page. We have lots of content that we share that's always free. In terms of certifications, we do have a certificate of Agile Change. But again, I'd encourage people to hit Google or hit LinkedIn or hit me on LinkedIn about that.
Mhm. Absolutely. The next thing is we're talking about, when we started, change managers are different than project managers, and you were talking about the agile coach. Could you tell us a little bit more about the role of the change manager and the agile coach? And would
Yeah.
you have both roles actually as we're doing a change initiative?
Yeah, it's really interesting. When I first started working, so an agile coach is really about their work is focused on the effectiveness of the agile teams, right? But part of that is they often have a very strong education focus. It means that when I first started working in this space, agile coaches would often feel very threatened because they perceived they were doing organizational change work with their education. And so when you find that you're working with an agile coach, the ability to sit down, have a conversation around role clarity is really important. What are you doing? What do I do? How can I make you look good? How can you make me look good? Really important, because otherwise you can have a bit of this going on with a bit of a turf war. Very few agile coaches will have the experience and the education that you have, the audience has here. However, they will feel very confident that they are all about organizational change. So it's quite interesting. Do you need an agile coach in the work you're doing? Yes, if you're doing agile transformation, I think they are a wonderful asset, but be really clear around role clarity, who's doing what, and how do you work together?
Mhm. Another question is, I'm not finding enough time to do the proper change impact analysis before things are released. How do
Yeah.
I deal with that?
This is one of the hardest things for change practitioners to get their head around. You will never get enough time to do a proper, detailed change impact analysis before things are released. And to some extent, this is where data-informed decision-making comes into play. The big mind-blowing moment is that we now do change impact analysis after go live.
Hmm.
So we release something to our customers or to our audience, and then we go, how did that work? What needs to be improved? What would we do differently in the next release? So your period of change impact analysis is post-release, not pre-release. It means the best you can do is high-level change impact analysis in the lead up to supporting the release of technology or products or whatever you're doing at speed. But that can be really scary, like stomach clenching, when you know that your name is attached as the change practitioner, the change manager on that initiative.
Absolutely. The other thing is, we were talking about this process, and at the end of a change, we have a handoff, and
Mm-hmm.
that it goes back to the organization. How do you deal with that with the agile change process?
Yeah. Okay. So this is the power of co-creation. One of the things that I like to do, one of the very first things that I often do in agile change work is, and I'm going into an organization next week. And I've just been asked, how are you going to manage this? Exactly the same issue is I will sit down with the leaders of the functions that are meant to be receiving the change, and I'll say, tell me, what do you need to be change ready? So not me overlaying my change readiness or the team's change readiness or the project team's business readiness. No. From the perspective of the audience, what do you need to feel that you are ready for this change? And that includes the question around how does it live after it has gone live? So, what type of support do you need, or what do you have planned in your team to be able to take this over from a handover perspective? So, I think one of the biggest challenges we have as change managers is often we get dropped at the point of installation, right? So, we don't get to do the work afterwards, or the company has not resourced enough for the work post go live. And again, because as I'm saying, we're doing change impact analysis after release, we're kind of starting to see a shift in thinking around the lifetime of a change in Agile because it keeps happening. I don't know if that makes sense, if I explained that one well enough.
That makes sense to, I think.
Mm.
Jeanette said, this is different. It feels a little uncomfortable. What if the expectations of change, what if the expectations of change support that the audiences are ready? So again,
Okay.
it's a little different way of looking at it. So how do you help people get a comfort level with this?
Mm, mm. Um, I find that one, acknowledging, we often talk about Nancy Martin's quote, my job is not to make you comfortable with change, it's to make you comfortable with discomfort, applies in this space. And so part of it is being really validating and being, I think the worst thing you can do is to be the rah-rah cheerleader, toxic positivity of change management, right? And to actually have real conversations with our stakeholders to say, this might feel uncomfortable. It is a new way of working. But here's how I want to give you comfort, right? Here's how we de-risk the discomfort that you're going to feel. We are going to do things in small cycles. We are going to ask for feedback immediately. We're going to use that feedback and we're going to improve what we do next. That way, you have control over what we're doing. I think it's also really important to empower your receivers of change to be active participants in the change. So they get the call to say, no, this team is not ready for these reasons. And you then have to look at that. I think that's a really important, powerful conversation in the work we do, which is very different to what we've done in the past.
Mhm. Jen, there's several more questions, but
Okay.
we're getting to the end of our presentation. So again, encourage everybody to go over to Connect and continue the conversation there. We do have a list of the questions, so if yours has not been answered on the call today, we'll make sure that those do get carried over. I wanted to thank everyone for participating in the ACMP webinar today, and I would especially like to thank you, Dr. Jen Frahm, for that wonderful presentation. So many of the comments indicated that the presentation was really insightful information and
Fantastic.
included tangible actions that can be taken to adapt with Agile Change. Immediately following the webinar, a feedback survey will pop up, and we're asking everybody to please just take a few moments to complete our survey, as your feedback will help us shape future webinars. Also, we talked about the webinar exchange in the ACMP Connect to continue the conversations and engage with our speakers and fellow participants. A lot of people asked about the slides in the recording. This recording will be available next week in the webinar section in the ACMP resource library that we talked about before, which is located on the ACMP website at acmpglobal.org. If you already have your CCMP, this is just a reminder that by attending webinars, you can earn PDUs towards maintaining your CCMP. So record your hours today. Thank you again to our wonderful speaker and to all of you for participating. Have a great day.